Ever pondered the political dynamics of ancient Rome and how they might relate to modern US challenges? Let's dive in. The ancient Roman Empire, a civilization that spanned continents and centuries, was not immune to the trials and tribulations of politics. At its core, Rome was a republic, with power divided among the Senate, the two consuls, and the popular assemblies. But the reality was far from this ideal. Political instability was the order of the day. The Roman Republic was marked by constant power struggles among the ruling elite, the patricians, and the common people, the plebeians. This tug of war often led to periods of civil unrest and conflict. There was a constant jockeying for power, with ambitious individuals like Julius Caesar and Augustus manipulating the system to their advantage. Corruption, too, was rampant. Bribes, kickbacks, and other forms of corruption were commonplace. The spoils of war and conquest were often used to buy loyalty and influence, leading to a concentration of power in the hands of the few. The more powerful Rome became, the more wealth there was to distribute, and the more corruption seeped into the political fabric. This concentration of power was exacerbated by the lack of checks and balances. The Senate held the majority of the power, but its members were not elected by the general populace. Rather, they were appointed by the consuls, often leading to a consolidation of power among a select few. This imbalance was a breeding ground for political instability, as those in power sought to keep it, often at the expense of the broader society. The common people, the plebeians, bore the brunt of this political instability. They were often marginalized, their voices drowned out by the powerful patricians. Their concerns were often sidelined in the pursuit of power and wealth, leading to social unrest and dissatisfaction. The political dynamics of Rome had far-reaching consequences. The instability, corruption, and concentration of power led to the decline and eventual fall of the Roman Empire. The lack of checks and balances and the struggle for power among the ruling elite eroded the foundations of the empire, leading to its downfall. As the Roman Empire crumbled under its political turmoil, it's worth asking, are there echoes of these dynamics in the modern US? We'll explore this question in the next scene. But for now, let's reflect on the political landscape of ancient Rome, a civilization that, despite its grandeur, was not immune to the pitfalls of political power. The US, unlike Rome, operates under a democracy, but does this guarantee political stability? While we often think of democracy as a panacea for political ills, the US still faces its fair share of challenges. One of the most glaring is political polarization. Much like the factionalism that plagued the Roman Senate, the United States grapples with deep divisions along party lines. This has led to gridlock in Congress, with lawmakers often prioritizing partisan interests over the common good. But here's where we see a crucial distinction between the US and Rome. While Rome's political instability often led to violent power struggles and eventually the downfall of the Republic, the United States has mechanisms in place to mitigate the effects of polarization. These include checks and balances between branches of government, term limits, and the ability of citizens to vote out ineffective leaders. Yet these mechanisms are not without their flaws. Governance issues remain a significant challenge in the US. The bureaucracy is often criticized for being slow and inefficient, and the legislative process can be bogged down by partisan politics. Moreover, the influence of money in politics presents another parallel with Rome. Just as wealthy Roman elites could buy influence and power, so too can corporations and wealthy individuals in the US through campaign contributions and lobbying. This raises questions about the integrity of the democratic process, and whether it truly represents the interests of all citizens. However, it's essential to note that the US has democratic safeguards that Rome lacked. For instance, campaign finance laws, while imperfect, aim to limit the influence of money in politics. And government transparency initiatives strive to hold politicians accountable for their actions. In Rome, corruption often went unchecked, leading to widespread discontent and ultimately the collapse of the Republic. In contrast, the US has an independent judiciary and a free press, both of which play a crucial role in exposing and punishing corruption. So while the US certainly faces its share of political challenges, the mechanisms of democracy provide avenues for addressing these issues that Rome simply didn't have. But let's not forget, politics doesn't exist in a vacuum. It's intertwined with the economy, and just as Rome struggled with economic issues like reliance on conquest and slave labor, the US faces its own economic challenges. While far from Rome's political turmoil, the US still grapples with its own unique challenges. But what about economic structures? As we'll see in our next segment, these challenges, from economic inequality to labor issues, can have far-reaching implications for societal cohesion and stability. So let's dive in and explore these economic structures, shall we? Rome's economy relied heavily on conquests, tribute, and slave labor. But what were the societal implications of this? Let's delve deeper into this fascinating and complex chapter of history. At the height of its power, the Roman Empire boasted an economy that was a marvel of the ancient world. Yet this economic powerhouse, which stretched from the arid deserts of Africa to the frigid frontiers of Britannia, was built on sand. The Roman economy was heavily dependent on conquests, the tributes they exacted, and the labor of enslaved people they captured. This economic model, while immensely profitable in the short term, was fundamentally unsustainable. Conquests brought wealth, yes, but they also brought new lands to manage and people to control, stretching Rome's resources thin. The tributes, while a significant source of income, were inconsistent and could dwindle or disappear if a province revolted or was lost. Perhaps the most insidious aspect of Rome's economic structure was its reliance on slave labor. Slavery was pervasive in the Roman Empire, permeating every level of society, from the grand villas of the wealthy patricians to the bustling workshops of the plebeians. Enslaved people were the backbone of Rome's economic engine. Yet this reliance on enslaved labor had profound societal implications. It led to a sharp divide between the wealthy elites, who owned large numbers of slaves, and the poorer classes, who could not afford to compete with free labor. This economic inequality bred resentment and social unrest, further straining the fabric of Roman society. Furthermore, the constant need for new conquests and slaves created a militaristic culture that glorified war and violence. It was a culture that rewarded aggression and expansion, often at the expense of diplomacy and stability. As the conquests slowed and the tributes dwindled, Rome found itself in an economic quagmire. With fewer new territories to conquer and fewer slaves to exploit, the Roman economy began to falter. The strain of maintaining an overstretched empire coupled with rampant corruption and mismanagement eventually led to a series of economic crises that Rome could not recover from. In the end, Rome's unsustainable economic model played a significant role in its downfall. It was a system that enriched a few at the expense of many, a system that valued conquest over stability, a system that was ultimately built on the suffering of others. Rome's economic model eventually led to its downfall. Does the US share any economic similarities? As we continue our journey through history, let's keep this question in mind. For now, let's move on to the next chapter of our exploration. The contemporary US economy. In the US, economic inequality, labor issues, and taxation stir debates. But how do they impact societal cohesion and stability? Economic inequality is a hot-button issue in the US today. The gap between the richest and the poorest has widened considerably over the last few decades. The top 1% of the population holds a significant portion of the nation's wealth, while the rest of the population struggles to make ends meet. This imbalance creates a chasm between different socioeconomic groups and can lead to social instability, as seen in protests and movements calling for a more equitable distribution of wealth. Labor issues are another major economic challenge. The US labor market has been experiencing a significant shift, with automation replacing traditional jobs and the gig economy disrupting the conventional employer-employee relationship. These changes have left many workers in precarious positions, often without job security or adequate benefits. This uncertainty can lead to dissatisfaction and unrest, further straining societal cohesion. Taxation, meanwhile, is a contentious issue that often splits public opinion. Some argue for a more progressive tax system, where the wealthy pay a higher percentage of their income, as a means to reduce economic inequality. Others advocate for a flat tax rate, arguing that it is more fair and encourages economic growth. This disagreement over taxation further fuels the divide between different segments of society. These economic challenges have parallels with Rome's economic dependence and social strains. Rome relied heavily on conquest, tribute, and slave labor, which eventually led to its downfall. The US, while not reliant on conquest or slave labor, does depend heavily on a stable economy. When that stability is threatened by inequality, labor issues, or disagreements over taxation, it can create social strains similar to those in Rome. However, there are also key differences. The US has mechanisms in place to address these issues, such as labor laws and a democratic system that allows for changes in tax policy. Additionally, the US economy is more diversified and less reliant on a single source of income, providing a buffer against economic downturns. Despite these differences, the US can still learn from Rome's experience. Economic inequality, labor issues, and disagreements over taxation can create social strains that threaten societal cohesion and stability. By addressing these issues proactively, the US can work towards a more equitable and stable society. In conclusion, while the US is vastly different from Rome, it still faces economic and social challenges. By examining these issues through the lens of history, we can gain valuable insights and potentially avoid the same pitfalls. As we navigate these complex economic issues, it's worth asking, what lessons can we take away from these historical parallels? History often echoes in the present. What historical parallels do you see in contemporary issues? As we've journeyed through the political and economic landscapes of ancient Rome and the modern United States, we've uncovered striking parallels and distinct differences. The exploration of these historical and contemporary challenges is not merely an academic pursuit, but a crucial step in understanding our current societal dynamics and envisioning a more balanced future. In the political turmoil of Rome, we saw a society grappling with corruption, power concentration, and instability. These challenges echo today in the United States, where we wrestle with political polarization, governance issues, and the outsized influence of money in politics. Yet we must also acknowledge the mechanisms of democracy and accountability that have evolved, distinguishing our modern political climate from the Roman era. When we turned our gaze to the economic structures, we discovered an economy in Rome heavily reliant on conquest, tribute, and slave labor. This economic dependence had profound societal implications, creating social strains that ultimately contributed to the downfall of this mighty empire. In the modern United States, we face our own economic challenges, grappling with economic inequality, labor issues, and taxation. These factors too have significant impacts on societal cohesion and stability. But history is not simply a mirror reflecting our present woes. It's also a guide, a teacher filled with lessons on how societies can navigate times of turmoil and transition. Just as Rome's experiences can shed light on our contemporary challenges, so can our modern struggles illuminate the past, helping us understand the forces that shaped historical societies. So let's not just observe these parallels and differences. Let's engage with them, discuss them, and question them. What insights can we glean from Rome's political instability and economic dependence? How do these historical experiences resonate with our current challenges in the United States? And importantly, how can we apply these lessons to foster a more equitable and stable society? These are complex questions, ones that demand thoughtful reflection and open dialogue. So I invite you all to share your thoughts, your insights, and your perspectives. Let's foster a community dialogue, a space where we can collectively reflect on the intersections of history and contemporary issues. In this shared exploration, we can deepen our understanding, challenge our assumptions, and perhaps even glimpse potential paths forward. By understanding our past, we can better navigate our present and future. So what can we learn from the Roman Empire's experiences? Let's continue this conversation, delving deeper into the complexities of comparing historical and modern challenges. Together we can uncover the echoes of history in our present and use these echoes to shape a more balanced, equitable future.